Welcome back, everyone. Hope you're settling in as we explore our beautiful Minecraft world together while diving into today's stories. The audacity is breathtaking in what we're about to cover, when boundaries are crossed and trust is shattered in the worst possible ways. Before we begin, just a quick shout out. You guys have been going crazy in the comments lately. I'm grateful to everyone who has been coming back to the channel to listen to these videos. You guys are really fulfilling my heart. Now, this first story, well, it's almost comical how perfectly these situations backfire, isn't it? When people think they can manipulate relationships and emotions without consequences, they're usually writing the script for their own downfall. Whether it's unwanted confessions or hidden financial disasters, today's stories showcase the spectacular collapse that follows betrayal. As we place these calming blocks and build our sanctuary, we'll journey through tales of friendship, marriage, and trust being tested in extraordinary ways. Our first story involves a best friend, his wife, and a confession at what should have been a celebration of love, proving that sometimes the most dangerous moments happen when we least expect them. Let me take you there. Tom and I had been best friends since our sophomore year of college. We're talking 15 years of friendship, the kind where you've seen each other through breakups, job losses, family drama, and everything in between. I was the best man at his wedding to Jessica 5 years ago, and honestly, I thought they were perfect together. Tom was always the more serious one, while Jessica brought out his playful side. They complemented each other, or at least that's what I thought. Their 5-year anniversary party was at this upscale restaurant downtown. They'd rented out the entire rooftop area, and Tom had gone all out with the decorations, photos from their relationship timeline hanging from string lights, their wedding song playing softly in the background. You could tell he'd put his heart into making the night special for Jessica. I remember watching him fuss over every detail, making sure the champagne was the exact brand they'd had at their wedding. It was getting pretty crowded as more guests arrived, and I started feeling a bit overwhelmed. I've always been more of an introvert, so I stepped outside onto the small balcony area for some air. The music and chatter became a distant hum, and I was enjoying the moment of peace, looking out at the city lights. That's when I heard the door open behind me. "Getting some air too?" Jessica asked, stepping out onto the balcony. She was wearing this deep blue dress that Tom had mentioned he'd helped her pick out specifically for the occasion. I nodded and smiled, shifting over to make room for her. "Yeah, just needed a quick breather. Great party, though." "Tom really outdid himself," I said, trying to keep things casual. In retrospect, I should have noticed how she positioned herself, slightly too close, her body angled toward mine in a way that wasn't entirely appropriate. The conversation started normal enough. How work was going, her complaining about some family drama, basic small talk. But then there was this awkward pause. You know the kind, where the silence stretches just a beat too long and something shifts in the atmosphere. I was about to make an excuse to head back inside when she suddenly placed her hand on my arm. "I've always wondered what would have happened if I'd met you first," she said, her voice dropping lower. I literally felt my body tense up, like someone had just dumped ice water down my back. "What do you mean?" I asked, though I already knew exactly what she meant. I just couldn't believe this was happening. "I've always had feelings for you," Jessica continued, her grip on my arm tightening slightly. "Ever since Tom first introduced us. I sometimes think about what it would be like if we—" I immediately took a step back, breaking the physical contact. My mind was racing, trying to process what was happening. This was my best friend's wife, at their anniversary party. This couldn't actually be real. "Jessica, that's not— I don't think of you that way. At all. You're Tom's wife. My best friend's wife," I stammered, completely blindsided by the conversation. Her expression changed then. Something between determination and desperation flashed across her face. "Tom doesn't need to know," she whispered, reaching for my arm again. "We could just—" That's when we both heard it. The sound of the balcony door closing. I turned to see Tom standing there, his face completely drained of color. The look in his eyes, I'll never forget it. Pure betrayal, complete devastation. He must have heard enough to understand what was happening. I've never seen someone's expression change so quickly from shock to rage. "Tom, this isn't—" I started to say, but he was already turning away. "Tom!" I called after him as he stormed back through the party. People were staring now, the happy chatter dying down as they sensed something was wrong. I tried to follow him, but Jessica grabbed my wrist. "Let him cool off," she said, and then unbelievably added, "This might be for the best." I pulled away from her grip. What are you talking about? This isn't for the best. This is horrible. That's when her entire demeanor shifted. Her eyes narrowed, and suddenly she was speaking loudly enough for the nearby guests who had wandered closer to hear. "You've been flirting with me for months," she said, her voice shaking with fake emotion. "I tried to let you down gently, and this is how you react." I just stood there, completely stunned. She was trying to flip the entire situation, making me out to be the villain. Several of the party guests were now watching us with suspicious looks. In the span of 5 minutes, I'd gone from enjoying my best friend's anniversary celebration to being accused of making a move on his wife. If you've made it this far into the chaos, you're as addicted to Reddit drama as I am. Make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss a story. Comment where you're watching from. I'm curious how global this Reddit addiction really is. So there I was, watching my 15-year friendship potentially crumble because of a lie. I pushed past Jessica and the now whispering guest to find Tom. He wasn't answering his phone, and I spent the next 3 hours driving around to all his usual spots. Our favorite bar, the 24-hour diner we frequented after college parties, even the basketball court where we played pickup games. Finally, around 2 a.m., I found his car parked at the lookout point outside of town. He was sitting on the hood of his car, staring out at the city lights. When he saw me approach, his body tensed, but he didn't leave. Progress, I guess. "Tom, I swear on my life, nothing has ever happened between me and Jessica," I said, standing a respectful distance away. "What you heard tonight was completely one-sided and completely unexpected. So I'm just supposed to believe my wife suddenly decided to confess feelings for my best friend? Out of nowhere?" His voice was hollow, exhausted. "I don't know why she said those things," I told him truthfully, "but I can prove nothing has ever happened between us." I pulled out my phone and handed it to him. "Look through all our text conversations, every message, every call. I have nothing to hide." For the next hour, Tom scrolled through years of text history between Jessica and me. Every message was completely innocent, arranging birthday surprises for him, coordinating group gatherings, the occasional meme exchange. Nothing remotely inappropriate. "She told people at the party that you've been flirting with her for months," Tom finally said, handing back my phone. "That she was trying to let you down easy." The audacity almost made me laugh. "Tom, you know me. 15 years. Have I ever done anything like that? Ever made a move on someone who was taken, let alone my best friend's wife?" He was quiet for a long time. "No," he finally admitted. "But why would Jessica lie about something like this?" I wish I had an answer for him then. We sat in silence for a while, both trying to process what had happened. By sunrise, Tom had at least accepted that I wasn't the villain in this scenario, but the damage to their marriage was already severe. The next few weeks were brutal. Tom moved out temporarily, staying at his brother's place while trying to figure things out. Jessica kept trying to contact me, first with angry messages accusing me of ruining her marriage, then with tearful apologies, then back to accusations. I blocked her number and made sure I was never alone with her. And here's where it gets absurd. About a month after the incident, Tom called me. Jessica had started seeing a therapist as part of their attempt at marriage counseling. During one of their joint sessions, she had finally broken down and admitted the truth. She had made up the entire thing. She confessed to the therapist that she had been unhappy in the marriage for a long time, but was too afraid to leave. Instead of addressing the problems directly or filing for divorce, she had created this elaborate scenario to sabotage her own marriage. She thought if she could make Tom believe she had feelings for me, he would be the one to end things, and she wouldn't have to be the bad guy. I mean, imagine thinking that making a move on your husband's best friend somehow makes you less of the bad guy in a breakup. The mental gymnastics there are Olympic level. Tom and I are slowly rebuilding our friendship, but it's not the same. There's this lingering awkwardness that wasn't there before. He's trying to work things out with Jessica through intensive counseling, but I can hear the strain in his voice whenever we talk. That easy, comfortable friendship we had, it's been replaced by something more cautious, more guarded. Jessica and I haven't spoken since that night. Tom says she's genuinely remorseful and working through some serious issues in therapy. I believe people can change, but some bridges once burned can't be rebuilt. Our friendship, whatever casual acquaintanceship we had before, that's gone forever. The whole situation taught me that sometimes the most dangerous betrayals come from the places you least expect. Tom and I will eventually be okay, I think, but nothing will ever be quite the same. One moment of selfish manipulation managed to permanently alter a decade and a half of friendship. Speaking of shocking revelations about spouses, wait until you hear what this next person discovered about their partner's secret life. My wife Emily and I had been married for 11 years, and I genuinely thought we had one of those rare, completely honest relationships. We shared passwords, had joint accounts, and always made big decisions together. I was that annoyingly happy guy who'd tell my friends, communication is key, whenever they complained about their marriages. Yeah, I was that guy. Turns out I was also completely clueless. It was a Thursday afternoon when everything fell apart. I was working from home, deep into a spreadsheet for a client presentation, when the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find three men in suits standing on my porch. They weren't particularly intimidating. One was even wearing those transitions lenses that hadn't quite transitioned back from being outside. But something about their expressions made my stomach drop immediately. "Are you Mark Anderson?" the one in the middle asked, consulting a small notepad. I nodded, confused. "Can I help you?" "We're representatives of Coastal Finance Solutions," he said, handing me a business card. "We're here regarding the outstanding balance on your wife's account. The payment is now 90 days past due, and we need to discuss immediate repayment options." I stared at him blankly. There must be some mistake. "My wife doesn't have an account with your company." The three men exchanged glances. "Sir, your wife Emily Anderson secured a loan against your property at 1472 Maple Street approximately 8 months ago. The outstanding balance is $53,487, including late fees and interest." My mind was racing. This had to be identity theft or some elaborate scam. Emily and I had a mortgage, sure, but we'd never taken out any loans against our house. I would have known about that. I would have needed to sign something, right? "I'm going to need to speak to my wife about this," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "She's not home right now." The middle suit nodded. "We understand. However, I should inform you that this is our third attempt to contact Mrs. Anderson directly. If payment arrangements aren't made within 48 hours, we'll have no choice but to begin legal proceedings, which may include property liens." They left their information and departed, and I immediately called Emily at work. She didn't answer. I texted her asking to come home immediately. Family emergency. 20 anxious minutes later, she walked through the door looking concerned. "What's going on?" "Is Lily okay?" she asked, referring to our 9-year-old daughter who was at school. "Lily's fine," I said, showing her the business card. "But we have a problem. 3 men from this company just showed up saying you owe them over $50,000 from a loan against our house. Please tell me this is a mistake." The color drained from Emily's face. Not confusion, not outrage at being falsely accused. Just pure, unmistakable guilt. My stomach twisted into knots as I watched her sink onto the couch, her hands shaking. "Em, please tell me this is some kind of mistake," I repeated, desperately hoping for an explanation that wouldn't shatter our life. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, and then the tears started. "I was going to fix it before you found out. I just needed a little more time." Over the next hour, Emily confessed everything. It had started small during COVID lockdown, online poker games to pass the time, while I was busy working from home and she was on furlough. What began as $20 buy-ins quickly escalated as she chased losses. Within months, she'd maxed out a secret credit card she'd opened, then another. "I kept thinking I could win it all back with one good night," she explained between sobs. "I was down so much, but I felt like I was due for a big win that would fix everything. But that big win never came. Instead, she opened more cards, took out personal loans, and finally, when all other options were exhausted, took a loan against our house using forged signatures. The whole time, I'd had no idea. None. Every time?" I asked, my voice hollow. "All those girls' nights with Stephanie and Jen? The work conferences in Vegas and Atlantic City?" She couldn't meet my eyes. "There were no girls' nights. Stephanie doesn't even live in town anymore. She moved 3 years ago. That hit me like a physical blow. Emily had been telling me she was going out with Stephanie twice a month for years. I'd even asked how Stephanie's kids were doing, and Emily had given me detailed updates on children that apparently she hadn't seen in years. And that's when everything unraveled. I started looking through our accounts while Emily sat silently crying. There were dozens of ATM withdrawals I'd never questioned. $500 here, $700 there. Always with a ready explanation when I casually asked. car repairs, a surprise for my birthday, helping her sister with rent, all lies, every single one. The gambling had consumed nearly $150,000 over 2 years. Our emergency savings, gone. The vacation fund, empty. But I wasn't prepared for what I discovered next. Emily, I said, my voice dangerously quiet as I stared at a particular transaction. Did you access Lily's college fund? The college fund had been set up by my parents when Lily was born. We'd been adding to it religiously for 9 years, and it had grown to just over $60,000. It was in a special account that required both our signatures to withdraw from, a safeguard I'd thought was unnecessary at the time. Her silence was all the confirmation I needed. How did you even access it? It needs both signatures. I practiced your signature, she admitted in a whisper. The magnitude of the betrayal was staggering. This wasn't just about money. This was about our daughter's future. This was about years of systematic lying. This was forgery. This was Emily choosing gambling over our family every single day for 2 years. The person sitting across from me suddenly felt like a stranger wearing my wife's face. How could the woman I'd built a life with, the mother of my child, betray us so completely? When I confronted her specifically about Lily's college fund, about how she could steal from her own daughter, something shifted in Emily. Suddenly she was defensive. You're overreacting, she said, wiping her tears away. College is still years away. I was going to put it back before she needed it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Overreacting? Overacting? You stole $60,000 from our 9-year-old daughter. You forged my signature. You put our house at risk. In what universe is that something I should be calm about? It's not like I was cheating on you, she shot back. It's just money. We can make more money. The sheer detachment from reality left me speechless. Just money? Just our life savings, our home equity, our daughter's education fund, just the financial security we'd spent over a decade building. The mental gymnastics required to frame this as a minor transgression were beyond comprehension. You need help, I finally said. Professional help. This isn't normal behavior, Emily. This is addiction, and it's destroyed our financial security and my trust in you. The next few days were a blur of painful discoveries and difficult decisions. We had to tell Lily a watered-down version of what was happening, that we were having money problems and would need to cut back on expenses. Watching the confusion and worry on her face, knowing it was completely preventable, broke something in me. I consulted with a lawyer about our options. Divorce was tempting, a clean break from the lies, but it wouldn't solve the financial disaster. The debt was legally mine too since we were married, and the forgery would be nearly impossible to prove. Plus, despite everything, I still loved the woman I thought Emily was. I just didn't know if that person existed anymore. After much deliberation, we established a recovery plan. Emily agreed to attend Gamblers Anonymous 3 times a week and begin therapy for addiction. I took complete control of our finances, cancelling all credit cards and setting up alerts for any account activity. We sold my car and one of Emily's family heirlooms to make the first payment to the debt collectors. We're now 6 months into a strict 5-year repayment plan. Every extra dollar goes toward debt. No vacations, no eating out, no new clothes unless absolutely necessary. Lily had to quit her dance classes, which was another heartbreaking conversation. Emily has been sober from gambling for 187 days. She's working a second job on weekends to contribute more to the debt. She's doing everything right, and I can see glimpses of the woman I married in her commitment to recovery. But trust doesn't heal as quickly as bank accounts. I still check our financial statements daily. I still feel a flash of panic when Emily's home later than expected. I still wake up sometimes in the middle of the night, wondering what other secrets might be lurking beneath the surface of our marriage. We're rebuilding, one day at a time. The foundation is shakier now, reinforced with verification rather than blind trust. Will we ever get back what we had? Probably not. But maybe we're building something different, something more honest because we've seen the worst and chosen to stay anyway. If you think that financial betrayal was shocking, wait until you hear about this roommate's secret business venture. I moved into this 2-bedroom apartment with Jake about a year ago. We weren't close friends or anything, just co-workers who both needed a place and decided pooling resources made sense. The place was decent, not luxury by any means, but it had a nice open kitchen, 2 full bathrooms, and was walking distance to the train. Perfect for two single guys in their 20s. The rent split was straightforward. We each paid half for the common areas, our own bedrooms, and the spare room stayed empty, occasionally used for storage or guests. At least that's what I thought was happening. Looking back, there were signs something weird was going on that I completely missed. I worked night shifts at the hospital, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. 3 or 4 days a week. It's brutal on the social life, but the pay differential makes it worth it. About 3 months after we moved in, I started noticing little things out of place when I'd come home in the mornings. Different mugs in the dish rack, the couch pillows arranged differently. Once I even found a woman's hair tie on the bathroom counter. When I mentioned these things to Jake, he'd just shrug and say, "Must have been the cleaning lady," or "I had some friends over." Then the doorbell started ringing at odd hours. I'd be trying to sleep at 2 p.m. and someone would be buzzing our apartment. When I'd answer, confused strangers would be standing there with luggage, looking equally confused to see me. "Is this 4B? "We're here for the room," a couple said one afternoon. "Wrong apartment," I told them. "We don't have any rooms for rent." This happened 3 more times over the next few weeks. Each time I'd tell Jake about it and he'd dismiss it as people getting the wrong building or apartment number. "This complex is confusing," he'd say. "People probably meant to go to 4D or Building B." I believed him because, well, why wouldn't I? The alternative, that my roommate was somehow involved in these random people showing up, seemed far-fetched, until the day I caught a stomach bug at work and came home 6 hours early. I walked into our apartment at 1 a.m. to find a middle-aged couple sitting at our kitchen counter eating cereal. My cereal, actually. They looked startled, but not nearly as startled as people should be when a stranger walks into an apartment they're in. "Hello?" I said, completely disoriented from both the fever and finding strangers in my kitchen. "Oh, you must be the roommate," the woman said cheerfully. "Jake mentioned you work nights." "We're the Millers. We're staying in the guest room for the weekend." I stood there, my scrubs still on, trying to process what she was saying. "I'm sorry, what?" "We don't have a guest room for rent." The couple exchanged glances. "We booked it through Quick Stay," the husband said, pulling out his phone. "See? 2 nights, private room in shared apartment." He showed me the listing with photos of our apartment, including several pictures of the spare room made up like a hotel suite, complete with folded towels on the end of the bed and a little welcome basket. But what really sent me reeling was seeing photos of my bedroom included in the listing. My bedroom. The description read, "Private guest room in 2-bedroom apartment. Second bedroom occupied by quiet medical professional who works nights. Main bedroom photos included for reference only." For reference? My personal space was being used as an advertisement. The Millers, sensing the tension, quickly explained they'd been given a key by Jake and told they could use the common areas when he wasn't home. They seemed like perfectly nice people who had no idea they were part of a scam. I apologized to them and explained the situation, that Jake had no permission to rent out any part of our apartment. I didn't have the heart to kick them out at 1 a.m., so I told them they could stay the night but should contact Quick Stay about a refund in the morning. Then I locked myself in my room and waited for Jake to come home. He waltzed in around 10 a.m., and I was sitting at the kitchen table waiting. The Millers had already left after an awkward breakfast where I learned they'd paid $280 for 2 nights. "Want to explain why there were strangers in our apartment using our kitchen and eating my food?" I asked as soon as he walked through the door. Jake didn't even have the decency to look embarrassed. "Oh, you met the Millers? They seem nice." The casual way he acknowledged it, like this was a completely normal situation, left me momentarily speechless. "How long have you been renting out the spare room?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. He shrugged. "About 6 months. "Why?" 6 months. Half the time we'd been living there. I'd been sleeping during the day while complete strangers had access to our apartment. "Are you serious right now?" I exploded. "You've been letting strangers into our apartment while I'm sleeping? Without telling me? And using pictures of my bedroom to advertise?" That's when Jake hit me with the most entitled response I could imagine. "I deserve compensation for handling all the apartment management. I'm the one who deals with the landlord, sets up utility payments, and coordinates repairs." By apartment management, he apparently meant sending the occasional text to our landlord about a leaky faucet. For this minimal effort, he felt entitled to pocket hundreds of dollars weekly by renting out space in our shared apartment. I pointed out the obvious, that our lease explicitly prohibited subletting of any kind. We could both be evicted for what he was doing. His response? The landlord never checks and the guests are told to be discreet. And here's where it gets absurd. While scrolling through his rental listings, he had our place on 3 different platforms. I noticed reviews mentioning missing items. 1. Guest complained that her expensive face cream disappeared from the bathroom. Another mentioned a phone charger that vanished. "Jake," I said slowly, "have you been stealing from your guests?" "Of course not," he scoffed. "They probably just misplaced their stuff. Travelers are always losing things," but the reviews were specific. Items there one day, gone the next, which meant either Jake was taking them, or even worse, these strangers he was giving keys to were accessing other parts of the apartment, including my room, while I was sleeping. The idea that unknown people might have been in my bedroom while I was unconscious made my skin crawl. I couldn't believe the violation of privacy and trust, not just to me, but to these unsuspecting guests who didn't realize they were staying in an unauthorized rental. I'd had enough. I documented everything: screenshots of the listings, photos of the spare room set up for guests, the reviews mentioning missing items, and text messages where Jake acknowledged what he was doing. Then I contacted all 3 rental platforms to report the unauthorized listing. Next, I called our landlord. I was terrified we'd both be evicted, but I couldn't continue living with someone who had so completely violated my trust. To my surprise, the landlord was understanding once I explained the situation and showed him the evidence that I wasn't involved. "This isn't the first time we've dealt with this," he sighed, "but it's the first time the other roommate has reported it." Jake was served with an eviction notice the following week. I was allowed to stay and find a new roommate, a legitimate one approved by the management company. When Jake realized what was happening, he threatened to sue me for lost income and damaging his rental reputation. "You might want to rethink that," I told him, "because what you've been doing is fraud. You collected money by renting property you didn't have the right to rent. That's a criminal offense, not just a lease violation." He backed down immediately. 2 weeks later, he was gone, but not before trying to take the new microwave that I had purchased. It's been 3 months since then. I've installed security cameras in the common areas with my new roommate's knowledge and consent, changed all the locks, and gotten a safe for my valuables. My new roommate is a law student who is barely ever home, which suits me fine. But even now, I sometimes wake up during the day with that momentary panic, wondering if someone is in the apartment who shouldn't be there. I find myself checking under the bed and behind the shower curtain, like a kid afraid of monsters. Except in my case, the monster was the person I was sharing a living space with, and the threat was very real. You never really understand how important feeling safe in your own home is until someone takes that away from you. Now let's shift gears to a workplace betrayal that left one employee absolutely devastated. I'd been at Meridian Marketing for just over 3 years, working my way up from entry-level analyst to senior strategist. The company wasn't perfect, but it was growing fast, and they had this clear promotion track that rewarded innovation. The next step for me was account director: better pay, my own team, and most importantly, a seat at the decision-making table. I'd been passed over twice already, but I was determined to make it happen this time. The opportunity came when our biggest client, a subscription meal service, reported a 30% drop in customer retention. They were hemorrhaging subscribers after their 6-month mark, and the executive team assembled a special task force to solve it. I volunteered immediately, seeing my chance to finally prove myself. While the rest of the team focused on quick fixes, discount codes, loyalty points, the usual stuff, I took a different approach. For 6 months, I worked weekends and late nights analyzing customer data, conducting user interviews, and developing what I called the milestone momentum strategy. The core idea was revolutionary. Instead of trying to prevent all cancellations, we would strategically allow certain low-value customers to leave while creating personalized milestone rewards for high-value customers, dramatically improving overall retention value, even if raw retention numbers stayed similar. The math was solid. My projections showed a potential 47% increase in customer lifetime value, despite only a 15% improvement in raw retention. I built custom dashboards, created implementation timelines, even developed a machine learning model to identify which customers to focus retention efforts on. This wasn't just a good idea, it was career-defining work. A week before the big presentation to executives, my colleague Diane stopped by my desk. Diane had started at the company around the same time as me and was also gunning for the account director position. We weren't friends exactly, but We maintained a professional relationship. "How's the retention project going?" she asked casually, leaning against my cubicle wall. "Actually, I'm just finalizing my presentation," I said, feeling pretty confident. "I think I've cracked something big here. Mind if I take a look?" "I'm presenting on the digital marketing angle, and I want to make sure we're not overlapping." Looking back, alarm bells should have been ringing, but I was excited about my work and, honestly, wanted a little validation. I turned my monitor toward her and walked her through the whole strategy. The segmentation approach, the milestone triggers, the predictive models, everything. She asked thoughtful questions and seemed genuinely impressed. "This is brilliant," she said. "Seriously, I think this could be the promotion winner for you." "Thanks," I replied. "I'm presenting last on Thursday, so hopefully it'll leave a strong final impression." She nodded. "Absolutely. Hey, would you mind sending me those churn prediction charts? They might help contextualize some of my social media recommendations." Without hesitation, I forwarded her the entire presentation. "Here you go. Just please don't share it around before Thursday." "Of course not," she assured me with a smile. "Your work deserves its moment." Thursday arrived and the boardroom was packed with our executive team, plus representatives from the client. I was nervous but prepared, with printed handouts and additional data to support any questions. The presentation order had been set for weeks: first operations, then customer service, digital marketing, and finally my retention strategy as the comprehensive solution. Operations and customer service went as expected. Then Diane stood up for what should have been the digital marketing portion, but instead of her PowerPoint, my familiar slides appeared on screen. "Today I'd like to present a comprehensive solution to our retention problem," she began, using almost my exact planned opening. I sat there in shock as she delivered my entire strategy, my research, my analytics, my implementation plan, word for word in some places. She even used my personal anecdotes about user interviews. The executives were clearly impressed, nodding and taking extensive notes. "The key innovation here," she said confidently, "is that we're not trying to keep everyone. We're strategically focusing on high-value customers through personalized milestone achievements." That was word for word from my executive summary. Word for word. I was frozen in disbelief. Was this actually happening? She continued for 20 minutes, fielding questions expertly, using information I'd shared with her just days before. The client representatives were particularly enthusiastic, with one stating, "This is exactly what we've been looking for." When she finished, the CMO turned to me and said, "I believe you're next with the retention strategy." Still dazed, I managed to stammer, "Actually, what Diane just presented? That was my retention strategy, the exact one I've been working on for 6 months." The room went silent. Diane didn't miss a beat. "I think there's some confusion," she said smoothly. "We collaborated on aspects of this approach, and I understand you have a similar direction, but this framework is something I've been developing since the project began." "No, that's not true," I insisted, feeling my face flush. "Those are my slides, my research, my exact words in some cases." Diane tilted her head sympathetically. "I think you may have misremembered our collaboration. We definitely discussed these concepts, but the strategy as presented is my work." Several executives exchanged uncomfortable glances. The CMO cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should move on to your presentation, and we can sort this out afterwards." But what was I supposed to present now? She'd taken everything. "My presentation would be identical to what you just saw," I said quietly, because that was my work. "Let's discuss this offline," the CMO decided, clearly uncomfortable with the conflict in front of clients. "For now, let's thank both team members for their contributions and move forward with implementation planning." Just like that, it was over. The client loved Diane's strategy and wanted to implement it immediately. As we filed out of the boardroom, the Vice President of Client Services was already congratulating Diane on her innovative approach. I overheard him mention that this kind of thinking was exactly what we need in our next account director. I felt physically ill. 6 months of work, my breakthrough moment, stolen in 20 minutes. That afternoon, the CMO called us both into his office, where Diane maintained that the core ideas were hers, though she acknowledged my contributions to certain elements. When I became more insistent, she suggested that perhaps we had independently developed similar approaches, Great minds thinking alike were her exact words. The CMO, unwilling to directly accuse either employee without evidence, made a diplomatic non-decision. You both contributed valuable insights and will recognize that in your performance reviews. I went home that night devastated but determined. Not to let this stand. The thief gets the promotion while I get a pat on the head. No way. That's when everything unraveled. For Diane, not me. I came back the next day with a systematic approach to proving my case. First, I retrieved every email I'd sent about the project, showing the evolution of the strategy over 6 months. I found witnesses, 3 colleagues who had seen early drafts of my work weeks before the presentation. I dug up meeting minutes where I had discussed key concepts that appeared in Diane's presentation. Most damning of all, I discovered that Diane had accessed our shared drive at 11:42 p.m., the night before the presentation, and downloaded my final slides. I confirmed she had then uploaded a new file, with her name on it, at 3:17 a.m. I compiled everything into a detailed report and sent it directly to the CMO and head of HR. 2 days later, I was called into a meeting with senior management. Diane was noticeably absent. "We've reviewed your documentation," the CMO began, looking genuinely remorseful, "and we owe you an apology. It's clear that the strategy presented was your work, and the company will be recognizing it as such moving forward." The head of HR explained that Diane had been confronted with the evidence and still insisted it was merely a misunderstanding, before eventually acknowledging she had borrowed more elements than she realized. Corporate speak for caught red-handed but still won't fully admit it. The following week, 2 announcements were made. Diane's promotion to account director was rescinded due to procedural concerns, and I was offered the position instead. Justice served, right? Well, almost. I accepted the promotion but requested a transfer to a different department. I couldn't imagine continuing to work alongside someone who had so blatantly stolen my work and would likely resent me for exposing her. The company agreed and even implemented new protocols for documenting and attributing internal intellectual property. Diane remained with the company for another month before leaving for a better opportunity elsewhere. I sometimes wonder if her new employers know what they're getting, someone willing to climb the ladder by stepping on others' fingers. The experience taught me the most valuable lesson of my corporate career. In professional environments, documentation isn't just good practice, it's armor. Your brilliant ideas are only truly yours if you can prove it. I still share knowledge with colleagues, but now I always leave a clear paper trail showing where concepts originated. If workplace theft shocked you, wait until you see how this next person's generosity was exploited by their own flesh and blood. When my brother Mark called to tell me he was in kidney failure, I didn't hesitate for a second before saying, "I'll get tested as a donor." That's what family does, right? Mark and I had grown up together, shared a bedroom for 16 years, fought over the TV remote, and protected each other from our parents' occasional wrath. Despite drifting apart in adulthood, him staying in our hometown while I moved across the country for work, he was still my brother. The testing process was intensive. Blood work, psychological evaluations, more blood work, CT scans. The transplant coordinator kept saying how rare it was for siblings to be such a perfect match. "It's almost like you're twins," she joked at one point. If only she knew how ironic that statement would turn out to be. After I was approved as a donor, things moved quickly. Surgery was scheduled for the following month, and I took a leave of absence from work to move back to my hometown for the procedure and recovery. Mark seemed genuinely grateful, if a bit entitled about the whole thing. Comments like, "Well, it's not like you're using both of them," made me roll my eyes, but I chalked it up to his stress about the situation. While preparing for the surgery, I needed to organize all my medical paperwork, insurance forms, and leave documentation. My parents still had a filing cabinet in their basement with all our important childhood documents, birth certificates, social security cards, immunization records, so I went digging for mine. What I found changed everything. Hidden in a folder marked Family Documents was my original birth certificate and another document, Mark's birth certificate, dated 2 years before mine. Nothing unusual there except his father's name wasn't my father's name. In fact, there was a note attached in my mother's handwriting, explaining that Mark was her child from a previous relationship, and my father had adopted him when they married. I was confused but not upset. This wouldn't change my decision to donate my kidney. If anything, it explained why we looked so different, despite supposedly being biological siblings. What bothered me was that they had kept this secret for 32 years. Why not just tell us the truth? I approached my parents that evening, document in hand. "Were you ever going to tell me Mark isn't my biological brother?" I asked. Their faces went pale. My mother started crying immediately, while my father got defensive. "He is your brother," he insisted. "Biology doesn't matter. We didn't want either of you to feel different." I assured them I wasn't angry about the adoption, just the deception. Mark deserved to know his biological history, especially with his medical issues. They reluctantly agreed to talk to him after his surgery, but something still felt off about the whole situation. The transplant coordinator's surprise at our compatibility kept nagging at me. If we weren't biologically related, how were we such a perfect match? I decided to dig deeper into the filing cabinet, and that's when everything unraveled. In a folder with my name, I found credit card statements, loan applications, and employment records, all in my name but for accounts I'd never opened and jobs I'd never held. Some dated back to when I was still in college. I found collection notices, credit reports showing defaults, and even a rental agreement for an apartment in a city I'd never lived in, all with my signature perfectly forged. The devastating truth hit me. Mark had been stealing my identity for years. He'd opened credit cards, taken out personal loans, even used my social security number for jobs he'd been fired from, destroying my credit in the process. I'd always wondered why my credit score was so poor despite my careful financial habits. Now I knew. I confronted Mark the next day at his apartment. I didn't want to stress him before the surgery, but I needed answers. When I showed him the documents, I expected shame, apologies, maybe tears. What I got instead was anger. "So what?" he snapped. "You moved away with your fancy job while I was stuck here taking care of Mum and Dad. You weren't using your credit anyway." I was stunned. "You stole my identity, Mark. You committed fraud using my name. You knew this could impact my entire future. Housing, employment, everything." "Oh, please," he scoffed. "You're just looking for a reason to back out of the transplant, using my medical crisis to settle old scores. Real nice, bro." The absolute audacity of his response left me speechless. Here I was, about to give him a literal piece of my body, and he couldn't even acknowledge the harm he'd done. Instead, he was painting me as the villain for discovering his crimes. Things went from bad to catastrophic when my parents got involved. Rather than holding Mark accountable, they pleaded with me to forgive him. "He made some mistakes," my mother said tearfully, "but he's facing a life or death situation. You can't punish him like this." "Punish him? I'm not punishing him. I'm refusing to give an organ to someone who stole my identity, ruined my credit, and doesn't even have the decency to apologize." My father's response was even worse. "Family obligation comes first. He's your brother, regardless of his mistakes." The emotional manipulation was unbelievable. They were acting like I was withholding a cup of sugar, not a vital organ that would require major surgery and lifelong medical implications for me. The more they pushed, the more clarity I gained. This wasn't a healthy family dynamic. It was toxic codependency wrapped in family values. After 3 days of constant pressure, tearful phone calls, and even our extended family weighing in, apparently my parents had told everyone I was refusing. To save Mark's life, I made my decision. I called the transplant coordinator and withdrew my consent. "I can't go through with the donation," I explained. "There are family complications I wasn't aware of when I volunteered." She was understanding but concerned. "This happens more often than people realize," she said gently. "Family dynamics can be complicated, but I have to ask, is someone pressuring you not to donate?" I almost laughed. The opposite, actually. The fallout was nuclear. My parents called me selfish, heartless, vindictive. Mark told anyone who would listen that I was letting him die over ancient history. I was painted as the villain in a narrative that completely erased his betrayal and lack of remorse. The family guilt trip is a powerful force. I almost reconsidered several times, but then I'd remember how Mark had responded when confronted, and my resolve would strengthen. Why should I undergo major surgery for someone who had systematically exploited me and couldn't even acknowledge it? Mark was put on the transplant list, and within 4 months he received a kidney from the deceased donor program. He's doing well now, from what I hear. I've only gotten this information secondhand because I've established firm boundaries with my family. I told them I'd consider rebuilding our relationship when they acknowledge the harm done by both Mark's actions and their response to them. It's been 2 years and they still occasionally send messages suggesting I should have been the bigger person and given Mark my kidney despite everything. Each message reinforces that I made the right decision. I'm no longer willing to set myself on fire to keep others warm, especially those who would complain the fire isn't hot enough. Some might call me cold for refusing to donate, but I see it differently. I didn't refuse to help my brother because he wasn't biologically related to me. I would have happily donated if that had been the only revelation. I refused because he showed me exactly who he was, someone who would exploit me without remorse and then blame me for noticing. Some relationships aren't worth preserving at any cost, even when they're family. You won't believe what this next poster found when they accidentally accessed their pastor's private messages. I grew up in a small town where the church wasn't just a building, it was the center of the community. First Baptist had been my spiritual home for over 15 years. I met my wife, Sarah, there. Our kids were baptized there, and I volunteered as a youth soccer coach and occasional Sunday school teacher. Pastor Williams had been leading our congregation for nearly a decade, and I considered him not just my spiritual leader but a friend, which is why, when my drinking problem spiraled out of control, he was the first person I turned to for help. It had started innocently enough, a beer or two after work to take the edge off after my promotion to regional manager. The stress was intense, and alcohol helped me unwind. But soon 2 beers became a 6-pack, and unwinding became necessary rather than optional. I started keeping vodka in my desk drawer at work, disguised in a water bottle. I'd hide bottles around the house where Sarah wouldn't find them. My business dinners grew longer as I'd sit at hotel bars until I was steady enough to drive home. I knew I needed help when I woke up one morning in my car in our driveway, with no memory of how I got there. That was my rock bottom, the terrifying realization that I could have killed someone, or myself, and wouldn't even remember doing it. The next day, I called Pastor Williams and asked if I could meet with him privately. He agreed immediately, and we arranged to talk in his office after Wednesday evening Bible study when the church would be empty. "I appreciate you making time for me, Pastor," I said as I settled into the chair across from his desk. "That's what I'm here for, David," he replied warmly. "What's on your mind?" I hesitated, my mouth suddenly dry. "Before I start, I need to know this stays between us. It's not something I'm proud of." Pastor Williams leaned forward, his expression serious. "Of course. Anything you share with me is completely confidential. Think of this as a confession, sacred and private between you, me, and God." His reassurance gave me the courage to continue. For the next hour, I laid bare every shameful detail of my addiction, the hidden bottles, the lies to my family, the times I'd driven drunk, including a minor fender bender I'd paid cash to fix so it wouldn't go on my insurance. I told him about passing out in my car and how terrified I was that I might hurt someone. "I need help," I admitted, tears streaming down my face. "I don't want to be this person anymore." Pastor Williams came around his desk and put his hand on my shoulder. "The fact that you're here shows tremendous courage, David. God forgives us when we truly repent, and I can see that you do. This is the first step on your journey to recovery." We talked about practical next steps, a local AA program, therapy options, and how to talk to Sarah. He even offered to be present when I confessed to her, if I wanted support. I left his office feeling lighter than I had in months, with a fragile seed of hope taking root. I told Sarah everything that night. It was the hardest conversation of my life, but she was surprisingly supportive. "I've known something was wrong," she admitted. "I'm just glad you're getting help before something terrible happened." Over the next 2 weeks, I attended my first AA meetings and had my initial session with a therapist. I was taking it one day at a time, as they say. Sarah and I were even planning to host a small Bible study group at our house the following month, my way of reconnecting with the community I'd been avoiding due to shame. Then came that Sunday service. Pastor Williams stood at the pulpit, his expression grave as he announced the topic of his sermon, "The Sin Among Us, Confronting the Darkness in Our Community." I shifted uncomfortably in my seat. Something about his tone made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "Today," he began, "I want to talk about a sin that's particularly destructive to families and communities, a sin that hides in plain sight while destroying lives from within." My stomach dropped as he continued. He was talking about alcoholism, Someone in our very congregation, he said, his voice rising dramatically, has been living a double life, presenting themselves as a faithful family man while secretly drinking vodka from their desk drawer at work. Sarah's hand tightened around mine. I felt the blood drain from my face. This person, Pastor Williams continued, has endangered countless lives by driving under the influence. They even had an accident they covered up with cash to avoid detection. They passed out in their driveway, too drunk to make it into their own home, where their trusting wife slept unaware. It was like being stripped naked in front of everyone I knew. Every detail, details I'd shared in strict confidence, laid bare for the entire congregation to hear and judge. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I could only sit there as my deepest shame was used as the centerpiece for a sermon on the dangers of secret sin. Pastor Williams never said my name, but he might as well have pointed directly at me. Several heads turned in my direction. My wife's hand was now crushing mine, her face a mask of shock and anger, not at me, but at the breach of trust unfolding before us. And here's where it gets absurd. Pastor Williams had the audacity to end his sermon by saying, "But there is hope for redemption. When we bring our sins to light, when we confess and truly repent, God's grace is sufficient." The irony was suffocating. He had taken my act of bringing my sin to light in private confession and exposed it without my consent, all while preaching about the healing power of confession. The betrayal was so complete it felt surreal. After the service, Sarah and I fled to our car, avoiding eye contact with everyone. As we sat in the parking lot, she turned to me, her face flushed with anger. "Did you tell him all those things in confidence?" "Yes," I whispered. "He promised it would stay between us." "That manipulative, self-righteous hypocrite," she hissed. I'd never seen my gentle, forgiving wife so furious. The next few days were a nightmare. People from church would fall silent when I entered a room. I received concerned text messages asking if I was walking right with the Lord now. The final blow came when the director of the youth program called to tell me that some parents have expressed concerns about me continuing as a soccer coach. The level of isolation and shame I felt nearly drove me back to drinking. The only thing that stopped me was knowing it would prove Pastor Williams right about the unrepentant sinner in their midst. That's when I decided to confront him. I scheduled another meeting, but this time I came prepared. I had started recording all important conversations since beginning recovery. My therapist suggested it as a way to maintain accountability and clarity when addiction often clouds memory. I had the audio of Pastor Williams explicitly promising confidentiality. When I entered his office, his greeting was frustratingly warm, as if he hadn't just destroyed my reputation and recovery. "How are you doing, David? I hope my sermon resonated with you." "Resonated?" I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. "You exposed my private confession to the entire church. People are whispering about me. I've been asked to step down from coaching. My family is humiliated." His expression shifted to one of righteous patience. "I never mentioned your name. I anonymized the story enough to protect your identity while using it to illuminate an important spiritual lesson." "Anonymized?" "You included specific details only I had shared with you. My wife knew instantly it was me. So did half the congregation." Pastor Williams sighed, as if I were a difficult child. "Sometimes discomfort is necessary for growth. I was using your story for the greater good, to warn others of the dangers of hidden sin." "You promised me confidentiality," I said, pulling out my phone. "You said our conversation was sacred. I'm sure you misunderstood." I played the recording. "Anything you share with me is completely confidential. Think of this as a confession, sacred and private between you, me, and God." His face hardened. Recording our conversation without my knowledge was deceptive. The sheer audacity knocked the wind out of me. He betrays my confidence in the most public way possible, then has the nerve to call me deceptive for having proof. "I'll be taking this to the church board," I told him, standing up, "along with documentation of your promise and breach of pastoral confidence." "They'll support my decision," he said confidently. "The spiritual health of the congregation comes before individual privacy." He was partly right. When I first approached the board, they were reluctant to criticize their pastor. Several members suggested I should be grateful that my sin had been used to teach others. The mental gymnastics were Olympic level. Then I played the recording. The shift was immediate and palpable. One elderly board member removed her glasses, pinching the bridge of her nose. "This is a clear violation of pastoral ethics," she said quietly. We have standards of confidentiality that must be maintained for people to trust their spiritual leaders. Pastor Williams was asked to resign the following week. He left with a self-martyred speech about being persecuted for speaking truth that made me want to scream. But the damage was done. Even with him gone, I couldn't walk into that building without feeling naked and exposed. The whispers had quieted, but they hadn't stopped. Every time someone looked at me during a service, I wondered if they were thinking about my confession. Sarah and I found a new church in a neighboring town, and I joined a secular recovery group where confidentiality is taken seriously. I'm 6 months sober now, rebuilding my life one day at a time. But I'll never again confuse a religious title with trustworthiness, or mistake spiritual authority for moral integrity. The crueler irony, Pastor Williams' betrayal nearly drove me back to the bottle. The very sin he so publicly condemned almost claimed another victim through his own actions. Speaking of trust violations, wait until you hear how this parent sabotaged their child's future. Senior year of high school, I was that student. You know, the one with color-coded planners, stacks of college brochures, and a spreadsheet tracking application deadlines. My guidance counselor called me hyper-prepared, which I took as a compliment. I'd maintained a 3.9 GPA while juggling varsity soccer, debate club, and volunteer work at the local animal shelter. My entire high school experience had been building toward one goal: getting into a great university far away from our small town. Don't get me wrong, I loved growing up in Millfield. But, as the saying goes, it was a great place to be from. The kind of place where everyone knows your business, where the most exciting event is the annual Harvest Festival, and where ambitious kids like me were constantly counting down the days until escape. I had my sights set on universities at least 3 states away. My mother had always been supportive of my academic achievements. She attended every award ceremony, proofread my essays, and bragged about me to anyone who would listen. But looking back, there were red flags. Whenever I mentioned specific universities, she'd redirect the conversation to Millfield Community College's excellent transfer program. When college acceptance season rolled around, she started making comments about how expensive out-of-state tuition was and how dangerous big cities had become. "I just want you to be practical," she'd say. "Start at 120, then transfer if you still want to leave after 2 years." But I was determined. I applied to 7 universities, my absolute dream school being Westlake University, with its renowned international relations program and study abroad opportunities. When their thick acceptance package arrived in the mail with a partial scholarship offer, I was ecstatic. This was validation of all my hard work. I immediately called my best friend Alyssa to celebrate. My mother's reaction was more subdued. "That's great, honey," she said with a tight smile, "but let's wait to hear from all your schools before making any decisions." Days turned into weeks, and I heard nothing from the other 6 universities. My confidence began to waver. Had I overestimated myself? I checked my application portal daily, but there were no updates. Eventually, thin envelopes started arriving from 2 of the schools, rejection letters. The others simply never responded, which seemed odd but not impossible in the chaotic world of college admissions. "I guess Westlake is my only acceptance," I told my mother, trying to mask my disappointment. She put her arm around me. "Or you could start at MCC. They have automatic acceptance, and you could live at home and save money. Wouldn't that be nice?" In the end, that's exactly what happened. The partial scholarship from Westlake wasn't enough to make it affordable without significant loans, and with no other options, I reluctantly enrolled at Millfield Community College. I told myself it was the sensible choice, the adult decision. I'd transfer after completing my associate's degree. Life at MCC was fine. The classes were easier than I expected. The campus had all the charm of a strip mall, and my social life consisted mostly of seeing the same people I'd gone to high school with. I lived at home, commuting the 15 minutes to campus each day, and watched from social media as my high school friends who'd left for college posted about their adventures in new cities. My mother was thrilled. We had movie nights, cooked dinner together, and she constantly remarked how lucky we were to have these extra years together. Our relationship was closer than ever, which was the only silver lining to my collegiate disappointment. Fast forward to the end of my sophomore year. I was preparing to finally transfer to a 4-year university, having completed my associate's degree with a perfect 4.0. My mother had been helping me apply for scholarships, using her email as a secondary contact on several applications. One afternoon, she asked me to check her email for a response while she was cooking dinner. "Sure," I said, logging into her account on her laptop. What's the scholarship called again? The Millfield Business Association one, she replied from the kitchen. It should have come yesterday. I scrolled through her inbox, not seeing anything relevant. I don't see it. Let me check your folders. That's when I noticed a folder labeled College, tucked between recipes and work stuff. Curious, I clicked on it, expecting to find correspondence about my current scholarship applications. Instead, I found dozens of emails from universities. Universities I had applied to 2 years ago. Universities that supposedly had never responded to me. My blood ran cold as I opened an email from Brunswick College, dated April 15th of my senior year. Congratulations on your acceptance to Brunswick College. We are pleased to offer you our presidential scholarship covering full tuition, a full-ride scholarship that I never knew about. With shaking hands, I opened another email from Eastridge University. We are delighted to welcome you to the incoming freshman class. And another from Clayton State. Congratulations. We are pleased to offer you admission. Every single school I had applied to had accepted me. Every single one. The room seemed to tilt as I discovered something even more disturbing. Email filters she had created to automatically send anything from these university domains directly to this folder, bypassing the inbox entirely. This wasn't a one-time moment of weakness. This was a calculated, ongoing deception, and that's when everything unraveled. In a daze, I continued searching and found drafts of the rejection letters I had received, created in Word on her computer, printed on letterhead she had scanned and manipulated. My mother had not only hidden my acceptances, she had actively fabricated rejections. Did you find it? My mother's voice jolted me back to reality as she entered the room, drying her hands on a dish towel. I turned the laptop toward her, my voice barely controlled. I found something, just not what we were looking for. Her face fell as she saw the screen, color draining from her cheeks. I can explain, she whispered. Please do, I said, fighting back tears. Explain how you deleted my college acceptances. Explain how you forged rejection letters. Explain how you manipulated my entire future. What followed was the most painful conversation of my life. Through tears and half-formed justifications, my mother admitted everything. She couldn't bear the thought of me moving away. She had convinced herself that I wasn't ready for life in a big city, that I needed more time to mature before leaving home, that she was protecting me from making a mistake. I was going to let you transfer next year, she insisted. I just needed more time. You're my only child. I couldn't just let you go. The betrayal was so complete, so fundamental, that I couldn't process it fully. This wasn't a parent refusing to pay for college or disagreeing with my choices. This was someone systematically dismantling my future because of her own separation anxiety. The full scholarship I'd lost was non-renewable. That opportunity was gone forever. The specialized freshman programs I'd been accepted into were no longer available to transfer students. 2 years of my education and potential connections, internships, and experiences had been stolen, and there was no way to get them back. I moved out that night, staying with Alyssa's family while I figured out my next steps. Within a week, I had applied to every university within driving distance that accepted late transfers. I was accepted to State University. Not my dream school, but a respected institution that agreed to take all my credits. 3 years have passed since that discovery. I graduated with my bachelor's degree last year and am now in graduate school. My mother and I speak occasionally, but our relationship remains deeply damaged. She still maintains she was acting out of love, that she was protecting me from making a mistake. She genuinely seems unable to comprehend the magnitude of her betrayal. You still got your degree, she'll say when I bring it up. What's the big deal about where it came from? The big deal is incalculable. The professional connections I missed, the study abroad opportunities lost, the career paths altered, not to mention the fundamental violation of trust from the person who was supposed to support my dreams, not sabotage them because they conflicted with her needs. I now have a pathological level of independence regarding my personal information. My mother has no access to any of my accounts. I've changed all my passwords, security questions, and contact information. I've learned the hard way that because I'm your mother isn't always a sufficient reason to trust someone with your future. Next up, a wedding day betrayal you have to read to believe. I never thought I'd be dealing with wedding drama worthy of a reality TV show, but here we are. My fiancé Ryan and I had been planning our wedding for over a year. Nothing extravagant, but definitely the day we'd both been dreaming of. We'd chosen a beautiful garden venue, hired a photographer whose work we adored, and carefully selected our wedding party from our closest friends. Kelsey had been my friend since college. We'd been roommates for 2 years, and she was there through my disastrous breakups, job changes, and eventually meeting Ryan. She was an obvious choice for bridesmaid, and she seemed thrilled when I asked her. Looking back, there were signs I completely missed. How her enthusiasm dimmed whenever Ryan was around. How she'd make small comments questioning whether we were rushing things, despite dating for 3 years. But hindsight, as they say, is 2020. The wedding was just 2 days away, and we were in full crisis management mode. Last-minute RSVPs, final vendor confirmations, welcome bags for out-of-town guests, the usual chaos. Kelsey had volunteered to help coordinate with vendors while I finished my vows and handled family drama. My aunt was threatening not to come if her ex-husband was seated anywhere near her table. Classic. I was in the middle of writing my vows when my phone died. Completely dead, wouldn't turn back on. Perfect timing, right? I'd been using it to reference some notes, and I needed to check a text from our caterer about a last-minute menu change. Kelsey, can I borrow your phone? Mine just died and I need to check something with the caterer, I called out to her. She was in the kitchen of my apartment, supposedly confirming final details with the florist. Sure, she responded, sounding weirdly hesitant. It's in my purse on the counter. I just need to finish something first. I was too stressed to notice her tone. I walked into the kitchen, grabbed her phone from her purse, and was about to ask for her passcode when I saw her screen was already unlocked. And that's when I saw the notifications. 3 text messages from someone saved as Amanda W. The preview showed, so I'll just stand up when they ask if anyone objects? Or should I wait until... Amanda Wilson, Ryan's ex-girlfriend. The one he'd dated briefly before meeting me. The one who'd tried to reconnect with him multiple times after our engagement was announced. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. With shaking hands, I opened the messages, telling myself there had to be some explanation. There wasn't. The conversation between Kelsey and Amanda spanned weeks. Kelsey had reached out to Amanda shortly after my bachelorette party, saying she needed to talk about Ryan. What followed was a detailed plan to disrupt our wedding, with Kelsey feeding Amanda information about the ceremony, helping her craft what to say when objecting, and even suggesting she mention the weekend in Chicago, referring to a business trip Ryan had taken months ago that Kelsey had repeatedly implied might have involved cheating. It hadn't. I'd actually surprised him there for one night, but Kelsey didn't know that. That would have been devastating enough, but as I kept scrolling, I discovered something even more sinister. Kelsey hadn't just been helping Amanda plan to object. She'd been actively sabotaging our wedding arrangements. I accidentally gave the photographer the wrong time, so he'll show up 2 hours late, she'd texted Amanda. And I cancelled the flower delivery, but told Ellie it was confirmed. The messages kept coming. Changed the dinner menu to include shellfish, even though Ryan's dad is allergic. Told at least 15 guests the ceremony starts at 6 instead of 4. Gave the DJ a completely different first dance song. I felt physically ill reading these messages. This wasn't just a momentary lapse in judgment or a friend making a mistake. This was calculated, extended sabotage from someone I trusted with one of the most important days of my life. I looked up to see Kelsey standing in the doorway, her face pale as she realized what I was reading. "What is this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper as I held up her phone. "Why would you do this?" She started crying immediately. Not the regretful tears of someone caught doing something wrong, but the self-pitying sobs of someone who still somehow sees themselves as the victim. "You don't understand," she managed between gasps. "I've loved him for years. Ever since you first introduced us. He was supposed to notice me, but then you got together, and I thought it would pass, but it never did." I stared at her in disbelief. "So, you decided to ruin our wedding? To help his ex create a scene? To deliberately sabotage everything we've been planning? You stole him from me," she suddenly shouted, all pretense of regret vanishing. "He would have noticed me if you hadn't been there. We're perfect for each other. He just never had the chance to see it. And here's where it gets absurd. She genuinely seemed to believe this. Despite the fact that Ryan had never shown any romantic interest in her. Despite the fact that I hadn't stolen anyone, Ryan and I met at a work function where Kelsey wasn't even present. Despite reality itself, she had constructed this narrative where she was the wronged party. "Get out," I said quietly. "Get out of my apartment and my wedding." "You're overreacting," she said, suddenly switching tactics. "It was just a stupid idea. I wasn't really going to go through with it. Amanda's not even coming." "Really? Because it looks like you've already gone through with plenty. The flowers, the photographer, the wrong times and addresses." She flinched. "I can fix those. I'll call everyone right now and—" "No," I cut her off. "You've done enough. Just get your things and leave." What happened next showed just how deep the deception went. As Kelsey was gathering her belongings, her phone lit up with another message. Not from Amanda this time, but from my cousin Beth. The message preview read, "Did you talk to Ellie about what Ryan said at the bachelor party? She deserves to—" I swiped open the message before Kelsey could stop me. Apparently, Kelsey had been telling various friends and family members different stories about Ryan, implying he'd cheated, that he had cold feet, that he'd made concerning comments about our future. She'd been systematically sowing doubts about our relationship for months. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just wedding sabotage. This was someone who had been pretending to be my friend while actively trying to destroy my relationship. Every argument Ryan and I had over the past year suddenly came into focus. How many had started with "Kelsey mentioned" or "Kelsey thought you seemed." After Kelsey left, I spent hours doing damage control. I called every vendor to confirm details and fix whatever misinformation she'd provided. I texted all our guests to verify they had the correct time and address. I alerted the venue about the possibility of Amanda showing up to cause a scene, and they agreed to have staff checking names at the entrance. Then I had to tell Ryan. That was one of the hardest conversations we've ever had. He was furious, hurt, and confused, much like I was. He'd always considered Kelsey a good friend, and the betrayal hit him almost as hard as it hit me. "I never gave her any reason to think I was interested," he kept saying. "Never. Not once." "I know," I assured him. "This isn't about anything you did. This is about her creating a fantasy and being unwilling to let it go." The next 48 hours were a blur of reconfirmations, apologies to vendors for the confusion, and fielding concerned calls from friends who'd received strange messages. From Kelsey. She'd apparently gone on a tear after leaving my apartment, contacting mutual friends with her version of events, that I'd overreacted to a harmless prank because I was insecure about Ryan's feelings. Thankfully, most people who knew us didn't buy it. Those who were uncertain changed their minds when I showed them the actual text exchanges. Our wedding day arrived, and despite everything, it was beautiful. We had groomsmen checking guests at the door. Amanda never showed up. The flowers arrived on time after I'd made a panicked call to the florist, and we had our correct first dance song after confirming with the DJ 3 separate times. During the reception, several friends asked about Kelsey's absence. We kept our explanation simple. We had a falling out, saving the full story for after the honeymoon. When we did eventually tell people what happened, reactions were split. Most were appropriately horrified, but a few suggested I should consider forgiving her because she obviously has issues and must have been going through something. That's the part that still bothers me. The suggestion that systematically attempting to destroy someone's relationship and wedding is something that deserves forgiveness if the person was going through something. We all go through hard times. We don't all respond by betraying the people closest to us. It's been 2 years, and Kelsey still occasionally reaches out through mutual friends, asking if I'm ready to talk yet. I'm not. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. Some betrayals are too fundamental to move past. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment or a mistake made in the heat of emotion. This was a calculated campaign to sabotage not just my wedding, but my relationship itself. The whole experience taught me something important about trust, though. It's not about never being betrayed. It's about knowing who deserves your trust in the first place. Kelsey showed me exactly who she was. I believe her. You think that betrayal was bad? Wait until you hear about this property dispute that turned into an all-out neighborhood war. When I bought my house 3 years ago, I thought I'd lucked out with the neighbors. The elderly couple on the left were quiet gardeners who occasionally shared tomatoes. The family on the right had teenagers who sometimes played music too loud, but were generally considerate. And then there was Dave, directly behind me, a middle-aged guy who I'd waved to while mowing but otherwise barely interacted with. Our properties were divided by an aging but sturdy wooden fence that had probably been there since the houses were built in the 90s. Everything was fine until I returned from a 5-day business trip to Chicago. I pulled into my driveway, walked around to the backyard to check on my grill. I'd been paranoid about leaving the propane connected and stopped dead in my tracks. The entire 50-foot fence separating our properties was gone. Not damaged, not partially removed, completely gone, like it had never existed. My yard and Dave's was suddenly one continuous space. I stood there for a solid minute, wondering if I was hallucinating from travel exhaustion. Then Dave appeared on his back deck, waving casually like nothing was amiss. "Hey there! Welcome back," he called out, walking toward me. "Don't worry about the fence. It was rotting and needed to come down." What happened?" I asked, still trying to process the dramatic landscape change. "Why didn't you call me?" Dave shrugged. "It was a safety hazard. Several posts were completely rotted through. Plus, it was encroaching on my property by at least a foot. I've been meaning to address it for years. Now, I'm generally a reasonable person. If the fence needed repairs, I'd have been happy to discuss splitting the cost. But completely demolishing it without so much as a text message seemed wildly inappropriate." "You should have called me before removing it," I said, trying to keep my tone measured. "That's a major change to both our properties." "Well, what's done is done," Dave replied dismissively. "Anyway, I've already ordered a replacement, top-of-the-line vinyl that'll last forever. Your half comes to about $4,000. I nearly choked. $4,000? For a fence I never agreed to? And where's all the wood from the old fence?" "Hauled it away already," he said proudly, as if he'd done me some massive favor. "The new one will be much better, maintenance-free, and really boost our property values." I told Dave I needed time to think about this and went inside to cool down. Something wasn't adding up about his encroachment claim, so I dug out my property documents. When we'd bought the house, we'd had a survey done, and the fence location had been marked. According to the survey, the fence wasn't encroaching on Dave's property at all. In fact, it was actually about 6 inches onto my land. Armed with this information, I went back to talk to Dave the next day. I brought the survey document and calmly explained that according to official measurements, the fence had actually been on my property, meaning he had removed something I legally owned without permission. His reaction was not what I expected. Rather than showing any concern or acknowledgement, he became instantly defensive. "Those surveys are never accurate," he scoffed, not even glancing at the document. "Anyway, the old fence is gone. The new vinyl one is being delivered next week. It's going exactly where the old one was, and I need your check for $4,000 by Friday." "Dave, I'm not paying for a fence I never agreed to," I explained. "If you want to build a fence, that's fine, but you can't just demand I pay for half of something you ordered without consulting me." His face turned an alarming shade of red. "That's not how this works. Boundary fences are shared costs. You can't just freeload off my improvement." I tried explaining that while many jurisdictions do have fence laws, they typically require prior agreement, not retroactive demands. But Dave wasn't interested in logic or law. He stormed off, shouting that I'd regret being difficult. And that's when everything unraveled. The next morning, I woke up to find a pile of yard waste dumped along where the fence had been, clearly on my side of the property line. Grass clippings, branches, and what looked suspiciously like dog waste. When I texted Dave about it, he replied only with, "Oops, must have misjudged where the property line is." This continued for days. Each morning brought new gifts, more yard waste, random junk, and his 2 large dogs suddenly seemed to have a designated bathroom spot right where my kids played. I installed security cameras that clearly showed Dave directing his dogs to that spot and deliberately dumping debris on my property at 5:30 every morning. After my third attempt at reasonable discussion was met with Dave blasting music from his garage, I realized this wasn't going to resolve itself. I contacted a property attorney who sent Dave a formal cease and desist letter, detailing the property line encroachment, the illegal removal of my fence, and the ongoing trespassing issues. The legal notice should have been a wake-up call for any reasonable person. But Dave? He took it as a declaration of war. Things went from bad to unhinged in record time. Suddenly, Dave parked what appeared to be rented construction equipment, a small excavator and a dump truck, along the boundary. They never moved or did any actual work. They just sat there, diesel engines occasionally running at 7 a.m. on weekends. He installed floodlights directed at my house that turned our bedroom into an approximation of daylight at 2 a.m. The music evolved from occasional annoyance to a nightly concert of heavy bass, directed at our house from speakers I'm pretty sure he bought specifically for this purpose. My personal favorite was when he began measuring the property line while we had dinner guests, using equipment that looked suspiciously like props he'd bought at a hardware store, rather than actual surveying tools. He'd stand at the boundary, look through a tripod at nothing in particular, and loudly exclaim, "Yep, just as I thought, encroachment." The level of pettiness would almost be impressive if it wasn't so exhausting to live next to. After 2 months of this escalating behavior and thorough documentation from my security cameras, we ended up in small claims court. I brought the property survey, photographic evidence of the original fence, videos of Dave's daily trespassing and harassment, and an estimate for replacing the fence he'd removed. The judge needed less than 20 minutes to decide in my favor. Dave was ordered to pay for a new fence at the correct boundary line, the one from my survey, 6 inches into what he thought was his property, plus damages for the trespassing, illegal dumping, and noise violations. The judge also issued a restraining order preventing Dave from entering my property or continuing the harassment. You'd think that would be the end of it. Court orders tend to sober people up. But Dave viewed the legal defeat as just another battle in his self-declared property war. He complied with the letter of the court order. He built the fence exactly where specified and paid the damages, but he painted his side of the fence an eye-searing neon green that's visible from space. He found creative ways to make noise that didn't technically violate noise ordinances, like taking up the bagpipes, which he practices exclusively in the corner of his yard closest to my house. His visitors mysteriously always park in a way that partially blocks my driveway. Never enough to be ticketed, just enough to be annoying. The neighborhood has officially taken sides. Half think I'm the villain who wouldn't chip in for a fence. The other half recognize Dave's behavior as unhinged, but avoid getting involved. We've become that house, the one with the property dispute that neighbors gossip about at block parties. I've considered moving, but the principle of it bothers me. Why should I have to leave my home because someone else can't behave like a rational adult? Plus, with the housing market as it is, I'd lose money on the sale, especially with the neighborhood feud as a known issue. So here we are, 2 grown adults locked in a cold war over 6 inches of property line and a fence that's already been replaced. Dave still gives me death glares when we accidentally make eye contact while getting the mail. I've become an expert at pretending he doesn't exist. The new fence is sturdy at least, though I could do without the color. The pettiest part of this whole saga, Dave's precious vinyl fence, the superior one that was going to last forever and boost our property values. It's already warping from improper installation, but you'd better believe I'm not going to be the one to tell him. Up next is a shocking story of identity deception that will make you question everything about relationships. I should produce the expanded story that was requested, sticking closely to the outline. I dated Tyler for 3 years before discovering the truth. We met at a mutual friend's birthday dinner, where he politely declined the seafood appetizer platter, explaining he had a severe allergy. Being the daughter of a nurse, I immediately switched to protective mode, asking about his EpiPen, making sure the waiter understood the severity, even wiping down my hands after touching the shrimp to ensure I wouldn't trigger a reaction when we held hands later. That level of caution became our normal. I'd meticulously check ingredient lists, call restaurants in advance to confirm they could accommodate his allergy, and completely reworked my own cooking habits. I grew up in a coastal town where seafood was a staple, but I willingly adjusted, purging my recipe collection of my grandmother's famous crab cakes and shrimp scampi that I'd treasured since childhood. My family took it just as seriously. My mom bought special pans for holiday gatherings that had never touched seafood. My dad, who traditionally made his signature seafood gumbo every Christmas Eve, switched to chicken and sausage instead. Everyone made these changes without complaint, because that's what you do for someone you care about. These accommodations shaped countless decisions throughout our relationship. We'd scan restaurant menus online before going out, eliminating at least half our options because of potential cross-contamination risks. Friends learned not to suggest certain restaurants for group dinners. I even avoided ordering fish when we did go out, worried about accidental exposure. The biggest sacrifice came last year when my best friend invited us to this incredible seafood festival in New England. A dream trip for me since I'd majored in culinary arts and specialized in coastal cuisines. The festival featured renowned chefs from around the world showcasing sustainable seafood dishes. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, but I declined without hesitation. What kind of girlfriend would drag her severely allergic boyfriend to a seafood festival? You should still go, Tyler had said, but not very convincingly. I'll be fine staying home. I refused. And leave you alone while I'm off enjoying something that could literally kill you? What kind of message would that send? We'll find something else to do together. So instead of attending my dream event, we took a hiking trip to the mountains. It was nice, but not the culinary experience I'd been dreaming of since culinary school. The truth came out in the most mundane way possible. Tyler's college roommate Jamie was visiting town, and we all went out for drinks. After a few beers, Jamie launched into stories from their college days, including an anecdote about Tyler's famous midnight seafood pasta that he'd make after parties. Man, that garlic shrimp linguine was the only reason anyone tolerated you coming home drunk at 2 a.m. Jamie laughed, oblivious to my confusion. Remember how you'd buy those giant bags of frozen shrimp and hide them behind the beer so none of us would steal them? I froze mid-sip, certain I'd misheard. Tyler's face told a different story. Panic followed by an awkward laugh as he tried to change the subject. But Jamie was too deep into reminiscing to notice, continuing with details about Tyler's various seafood specialties throughout college. The drive home was silent. I kept replaying Jamie's stories in my mind, trying to make sense of them. Maybe he was confused. Maybe it was someone else's cooking he was remembering. But Tyler's reaction had said it all. When we got home, I finally asked the question directly. Tyler, are you actually allergic to seafood? He hesitated just long enough for me to know the answer before he spoke. Not technically. What does not technically mean? Either your throat closes up when you eat shrimp or it doesn't. Okay, no, I'm not allergic, he admitted with a sigh. I just really hate seafood. The smell, the texture, all of it. I can't stand it. I stared at him, waiting for more explanation that would somehow make this make sense. None came. You've been pretending to have a life-threatening allergy for 3 years. Because you don't like the taste of something? Look, in my experience, when I tell people I don't like seafood, they always try to convince me I just haven't had it prepared the right way, he explained, as if this justified everything. They're always saying, oh, but you have to try my crab cakes, or you've never had fresh fish. It's exhausting. When I say I'm allergic, people just accept it and move on. I sat down, trying to process what I was hearing. This wasn't just about him avoiding foods he disliked. This was about 3 years of elaborate deception. All those times I'd seen him react to seafood restaurants, the mysterious rashes, the sudden throat tightness when we walked past fish markets, the detailed explanations to my concerned parents about his first anaphylactic episode as a child, all of it fabricated. But you've had actual physical reactions. I've seen you break out in hives after we ate at that place that serves seafood. I just rubbed my arm until it got red, he admitted with a shrug. The throat clearing and coughing is just acting. I looked up symptoms online so I'd know what to fake. The calculated nature of the deception hit me like a physical blow. He hadn't just told a single lie, he had researched, planned, and consistently performed this charade for years. And as the full implications sank in, my mind raced through all the unnecessary accommodations, the anxieties, and the missed opportunities. Do you realize I turned down my dream trip to that seafood festival because of your fake allergy? I asked, my voice rising. Do you understand that my entire family restructured holiday traditions because they were afraid of sending you to the hospital? Tyler had the audacity to look annoyed. It's not that big a deal. I saved us both from awkward situations. If I'd just said I don't like seafood, you'd have tried to change my mind or been disappointed when I wouldn't try your favorite dishes. So instead of having an honest conversation with me, you decided to lie about having a potentially fatal medical condition for 3 years, and that seemed reasonable to you? You're overreacting, he said dismissively. It was just a small lie that didn't hurt anyone. That's when I realized we weren't even having the same conversation. To me, this was a fundamental breach of trust that called into question the entire foundation of our relationship. To him, it was a convenient fiction that he felt entitled to maintain. It hurt me, I said quietly. It hurt me because I restructured my life around a lie. I worried about your health. I gave up things that were important to me. I watched my family change traditions to accommodate you. And the whole time, you were perfectly fine with letting me do all that for absolutely no reason. It's just food, he insisted. Why does it matter so much? Are you seriously this upset over some fish? But it wasn't about the seafood. It was about the ease with which he had lied, the commitment to maintaining the deception, and his complete lack of remorse upon being discovered. It was about realizing I didn't actually know the person I'd been building a life with. The next week was tense. Tyler oscillated between defensive, everyone tells white lies, and dismissive, I can't believe you're making such a big deal about this. What he never expressed was genuine understanding of why I felt betrayed, or any real regret beyond getting caught. After much reflection, I ended our relationship. Not over seafood, but because I couldn't trust someone who could weave such an elaborate deception and maintain it daily for years while watching me make unnecessary sacrifices. When I explained my decision, Tyler was genuinely shocked. You're throwing away 3 years over something this trivial? It's not like I cheated on you. That's when I realized he truly didn't understand. In some ways, this was more unsettling than traditional infidelity. This was a deliberate, sustained campaign of deception, woven into the fabric of our daily lives. This was watching me rearrange my life and passions while knowing it was completely unnecessary. This was lying to my face every single day for 3 years, without the slightest twinge of conscience. The real question wasn't, how could I leave over something like this? But rather, how could I stay with someone capable of this level of deception over something so insignificant? If he could maintain this elaborate lie for years about something as trivial as food preferences, what else might he be willing to lie about when the stakes were higher? It's been 6 months since the breakup, and I've gradually reclaimed the parts of my life that were put on hold. I went to that coastal food festival, it's an annual event, reconnected with my culinary roots, and started being more cautious about the foundations of trust in relationships. Some friends think I overreacted. Everyone has their little secrets, they say. But there's a difference between private thoughts and actively constructing a false reality for someone who loves and trusts you. I sometimes wonder if Tyler has moved on to his next relationship with a new allergy, or if he learned anything from our breakup. But mostly, I'm just grateful I discovered the truth before we'd taken even bigger steps together. Because a relationship built on a foundation of lies, no matter how seemingly small, is like a house built on sand. It might look solid until the tide comes in. And that brings us to the end of tonight's stories. I hope you found them as captivating as I did while building this peaceful Minecraft village. The human capacity for deception and betrayal never ceases to amaze me. From fake allergies to stolen kidneys, we've covered quite the emotional spectrum tonight. If you've enjoyed these Reddit tales of drama and revenge, please take a second, hit that subscribe button and notification bell. Your support means everything to this channel, and I truly love sharing these stories with you each week, while we build together in this blocky, peaceful world. Sweet dreams, everyone, and remember, the most shocking betrayals often come from those we trust most. If you enjoyed these stories, leave a comment telling me which one you found most outrageous, and subscribe for more Reddit drama next week.